Brownsville great again, you know, it's good. Don't worry about your taxes. Um, First of all, thank you for being here. We really appreciate it. There's a great opportunity. Commissioner Underhill and I have worked together in Brownsville since his election. I know that it's important to Commissioner Underhill. It's very important to me. And I know that it's important for the economic growth to bring about viable economic development projects into the Brownsville area. So I'm going to be supportive of that. But I'm also open-minded. The worst decision that I think has ever been made, and Doug doesn't like me to say this because he voted the wrong way, was the closing of Rawson Lane, in which I adamantly opposed, and I know many of my friends who sit out here supported it. But one of the things that I talked about was the taking of public property for private use. I'm not an advocate of that unless it benefits the goodwill of the people who reside in that neighborhood and benefit from living there. So tonight is simply a listening exercise for us. I certainly don't make public policy without open forum meetings, and Doug and I have had them on numerous of occasions to just listen to the citizens. I think maybe we have more staff than citizens, so on the efficiency of your tax dollars, I'm going to try to at least make this meeting quick so you won't have to wait. You'll waste enough on Thursday, Christian, so I don't want you to have to waste it on Tuesday as well by having a lot of staff here who will probably get comp time on Friday and not show up, and the government will shut down. So with that being said, I will simply turn it over to my colleague, Commissioner Underhill.
So it has been interesting since coming on. The way he said that, it was like we started when I came on the board, but the reality was that for a lot of things, particularly up in this area and the rest of Commissioner May's district, there were a lot of things that he was losing votes, and going down 2-3. When I came on the board, all I did was pick up right where he was, and those 2-3 votes started going 3-2. I drove down Diamond Dairy Road today, and it just kind of, you think about how much Wedgwood and the dumps were in the news so much, and the things that we were doing. Now as you drive through there, it just kind of reminds you of how much of a fight that was. But it certainly has been interesting since neither Lumen or Knight seems to have the polish that normally comes with this office. We've made for some pretty interesting comments and commentary, but that really is a reflection of who we are here on the west side. So this building that we're in, quite frankly, it was sitting, we had bought it, it was sitting and more or less rotting. We've made great progress to be able to have a meeting here without having to wear a mask. And with regard to the sitting, having these town halls, if one citizen comes, then the town hall was not a waste of time. Most everybody here is on the clock. Or is in some way an equity holder, but it will never be said on my watch that we made decisions in the shade. It will never be said that we made decisions without giving citizens the opportunity to speak. Certainly, having so few people show up is actually somewhat indicative, I think, of some level of either disconnect or some level of trust. And I know that for when you are in a situation of distrust, you end up seeing a lot of people come to these things and very angry. I think most of the time when I've been in here and I've talked to people with regard to Brownsville, there's always been people engaged and looking to participate. What's before us right now is the vacation of a road. My peer from District 3 will never miss an opportunity to remind me about the other unintended impacts of the Rawson Lane decision. If I had to vote on Rawson Lane today, I would probably still vote the same way. But I was not, and I will tell you that I have spent a lot of time going back and looking at my soul for why I decided the way that I did, and that is, it has given me an impression when it comes to vacating of public property. The one question that I'm allowed to ask with regard to a vacation of public property is this: is there a public interest in the ownership of that land? If the answer is yes, then the questions are over. Okay? If I had to vote on the vacating of X Street today, I would vote negative. I would not vote for the vacation of X Street. That does not mean that my mind is closed. That does not mean that I'm not looking. That's where I'm starting at. I say that so that everybody knows exactly where I stand. And as my understanding of this evolves, as this information comes out, as I look more and more at what the future of Brownsville looks like, as that position evolves, I will try to be as clear as I can as well. So understand that if it had to happen today, I would be voting in the negative. I'm interested to see how this decision and what we're talking about now fits into a greater Brownsville plan, which of course we don't really have. We've got a lot of greater Brownsville ideas, but we don't have a greater Brownsville plan, and I think that that's one of the things that would help us move forward as a group. So I am planning to sit and now shut up for the most part, and probably be not really appropriate for me to sit back here. So I would ask to hear from anyone who has an equity in Brownsville of any kind. And you know what, honestly folks, the staff members that are here, if there are aspects to this that come up that are germane to the discussion, I would ask that staff member to go ahead and take a time at the microphone as well. Like I said, everybody here, if you're taking your time tonight to be here, that makes you an equity holder in Brownsville. So I want to hear your opinion.
Thank you. Just like any funeral, give a hand of applause for it. In all seriousness, Doug and I have worked together well, and many times we've been opposed to each other on the dais, but one thing that we've been consistent with is that the western gate to the city of Pensacola, the anchor of Escambia County, is Brownsville. And so it's easy to win a vote. You know, well, it's not easy, but it's sometimes, you know, you win a vote 3-2, or you win a vote, you know, 4-1, but to move a community forward, it's good to have everyone on the same page, unanimous, to have staff, recommendations, all of your peers moving forward, the community that you represent moving forward. And so tonight we hope that we'll get to some type of consensus. I mean, if we can't all agree, let's agree to move forward. I mean, there won't be a vote tonight. After I turn the microphone over to Jack Brown, our administrator, unless there's a direct question for me, I'm going to sit out in the audience and listen. And I am an equity holder in Brownsville. I grew up in Morris Court. My church is in Brownsville. I own property in Brownsville. I grew up going to Pleasant, going there playing baseball at West Pensacola. 23 years of my career was spent at the Salvation Army in Brownsville, and about 40 years of my life was spent participating in youth sports in the Brownsville area. So it's very important to me that we come to a consensus that's good, not for any individual, not for Brownsville Church, not for Mike Kilmer, not for Pastor Horton, but really for the 200 plus children that participate in this summer day camp program that I hope one day will build a nice home in Brownsville and manicure their lawn and take care of their families and live in Brownsville and be proud to say that I live in Brownsville. Not to be proud to say that I'm working very hard to exit Brownsville and get a great job and move to the east side, but for them to be proud of the west side. So whatever decision I make won't be based on the closing of a road. It will be based on hopefully 10, 20, 30 years from now, making this a better community for my children and children that I coach. And with that being said, I'm going to turn it over to Jack Brown, our administrator, and I think he'll do all of the questions and introduce his staff and let staff say statements. And Gloria, thank you for being here. Saw you earlier today, and I know this is not the district that you're running for, but I know that you've been concerned about blighted and neglected neighborhoods, so thank you for being here.
Well, I won't introduce all the staff we have here. We do have quite a few staff. If we have questions that come up for individual staff members that I think it's appropriate to call on, then we'll do that. Normally, as county administrator, I tell the commissioners, don't ask me my opinion if you don't want my opinion. And, because if you ask me, I will give it to you. I normally do not favor closing roads or swapping roads. I think that you want to preserve public right-of-way. In this case, though, I do think this is a good thing to do for Brownsville. And part of the reason I think that is we're trying to protect this back lot from being turned into a parking lot, because we think it would better be utilized for the citizens of our community as a green space, as a park. There are beautiful heritage oak trees out there that we don't want to have to pay paradise and put up a parking lot. to quote a great American folk singer. But our first speaker tonight is Alan Bookman. And Alan, you got 3 minutes. You're just here to respond to questions. Okay, Mike Kilmer.
Right here. Thanks, Jack.
Aaliyah.
Ma'am?
What?
There's Mike.
How we handle this single block stretch of X Street is going to set the tone for the next decade or two of multi-million-dollar transformational development in one of the area's dearest neighborhoods. A retired chiropractor I met the other day interweaved with spirited reminiscing about the Brownsville revival, compared it to biblical Nazareth. The decision we make here will show, and I'll use Robin Ray Shard's word here, a balance. On one side is the approach where well-intentioned rich men shake hands in private upper-story offices and get it done quickly. On the other side is the slow, often grueling and expensive route riddled with bureaucratic red tape of building informed consent. Lumen, Doug, Jack, Evan, you are all creative thinkers who have shown enough insight and integrity to win and maintain popular support. I challenge us to leave here tonight with a plan for a balanced solution to this small but significant problem. Dr. Horton and I have shared experiencing and participating in the early part of a transformational revitalization in Brownsville. The Brownsville Arts and Cultural Center being probably the first multi-million-plus dollar project of many. Our children, Rivka and I's children, Rena and Oshira, are attending a second year of summer camp here, and it's been fantastic. Thank you. Evan, who I consider a friend and ally, envisions and is, with the help of God, developing a new town center here in the current and former land holdings of Brownsville Assembly of God. It looks like we're going to have the largest community center in the county, a fantastic arts-oriented elementary school, and a brand new affordable senior living facility designed according to community-oriented urban standards. Rivka and I, my mom, our kids, we're artists. This is a huge blessing, a miracle. We couldn't be happier than to be right here, right now. This is going to be a great new town center, but it cannot be the town center. The town center of Brownsville will always be along its central business corridor. It's the center because it's where people go for our everyday needs and where people are drawn for unique offerings. We are all, together, making great strides towards rectifying the spinal damage that occurred when street-side parking and reasonable car speeds were removed from the neighborhood central corridor, Cervantes Street, and what I'm going to optimistically call Mobile Boulevard, something you walk down. What we need now is to follow the lead of City of Pensacola CRA and revise the antiquated zoning laws that, on the one hand, allow sprawl-style, car-oriented development like we see at the Dollar General, which breaks all the rules of community-oriented development with a front-facing parking lot, a side-facing parking lot with dumpsters along its sidewalk, and a completely disconnected strip of sidewalk on the third side of the building. The only part of it that makes sense from a community perspective is the walkway that we residents have created ourselves by walking and biking through the empty lot next to the store. On the other hand, current zoning laws make it more difficult for people like Viet Coo because they are trying to meet out-of-date parking regulations. Jack told me last year that Evan had offered that the Brownsville Assembly parking lot would be available for use by the Arts and Cultural Center, which makes complete sense, being that it's a complete city block plus a block of Z Street that had previously been vacated to the church, which is now only being used a few hours a week. That's a terrific way to solve the parking regulations requirements, which were threatening to eat up the city block to the north of us. But maybe the current zoning doesn't make sense anymore. I also understand that the stretch of land between Mobile Boulevard and the Assembly's southern wall, where there are basketball courts, had previously been public. My assumption is that the plan was for the courts to benefit the neighborhood. But in nearly 15 years of living here, this is the first I've had an inkling that they might be intended for public use. Perhaps there should be a sign to let people know they are available, and probably also a fence to keep balls from running into the 50-mile-an-hour traffic 10 feet away from it. So what I'm asking is for us to take, public land should remain public in the public sphere. There's no way of telling who might ultimately inherit this stretch of public grid currently shared by a community diverse in culture, ethnicity, economic status, sexual identity, and ability in 10 or 20 years if we give it away now. And absolutely no control over how it will be maintained and developed. So what I'm asking is for us to take this opportunity to set the tone of patience and integrity for the coming waves of development in Brownsville. We're building a public park across Gonzales Street from the center, so that's another stretch of road that will need some attention. And it doesn't need to be expensive to be safe. We look forward to seeing the implementation of Jack Brown's visionary block-by-block masonry school, in which guided projects will include building local surface infrastructure. We have terrific traffic and road management staff in David Forte and Colby Brown. Put them in a room with someone like Kristen Wagley, which one of them is right now, and untie the red tape from around their wrists. If you really want community input, put a couple of us in the room as well. Tanya Gant, Valerie Jones, Clara Long, and Sherry Duffy are also very capable. If you want agility, put some faith in them and us. Give them some control. Let us, together, sketch out a plan for developing the overlay we'd like to see in Brownsville. In the meantime, how can we facilitate Dr. Horton's awesome vision and efforts without giving away public property?
Thank you, Mike. I gave you
Thank
my,
you for not cutting me off.
I gave you my 3 minutes also. Okay. Our next speaker is Priscilla McCorby. McCorby, I'm sorry. I thought it was an R instead of a V.
It's MC.
Okay. McCorby.
Yes.
Thank you.
Good afternoon, and thank you for allowing me to speak. I am a resident of Brownsville. I'm 4 blocks down. And the reason I'm here is previously, when they asked to close the street years ago when I first moved here, they said, okay. And they asked one of the questions, will you go on any other streets? They say, no, not. So now I'm confused. Although we have a senior affordable housing proposed to come, it's not going to benefit the area. Crime rate is still high. People are going to do what they want to do. Make it feasible for the seniors, I'm a senior, to walk, okay? Make it beautiful, put the signs up, but don't close the street. Like he said before, we keep giving property away for the benefit of one place. It could change hands in the next 5 years. And what will happen? It's a closed street. And we have to be cautious of how we keep giving things away and preserve it for our children. We need to look down the road. I do welcome seniors in the neighborhood, but my goodness, we got enough seniors and we got enough problems in Brownsville. When you close the street, crime rate is gonna get up. That's a target for the elders. Okay, you can't go down the street. So you gotta look at all the options. That's all I have to say. I'm opposing no.
Okay. Thank you very much. Our next speaker will be Evan Horton. Okay. Are there any questions for Evan Horton or Mr. Bookman?
I've got one.
Yeah.
How much would it cost to implement your vision? I mean, I think our shared vision.
Yeah.
What's the cost of that?
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, I think that in talking with Mike, and I appreciate your comments, Mike, they're very well thought out, and appreciate it very much, and thank you for the kind words. I think our visions are the same, and I think my vision with yours is the same for this. The issue for the seniors, residents, affordable seniors housing through the Florida Housing Board is to make it safe for seniors. It's not to close it so pedestrians can't use it. There's going to be lots of green space from what I understand. It's going to give more flexibility for the urban design, and I think that there are some real possibilities there. So it's mainly a question for me, what I understand, is a safety issue. Because you have the seniors' residence on one part, and you have parking and park space and green space on the other. They have to cross X Street. And in talking to some of the neighbors there between DeSoto and Gonzalez on X Street, I was talking to one mom who had a 2.5, 3-year-old, and there's cars whizzing by. She had to grab him 2 or 3 times because it's just a safety issue. So I think from a principle perspective, Mike and I disagree, but from a philosophical of what we want to see there is the same. It's just how we're going to get there, what does that look like, and so on. So for me, it's a safety concern. And I think it does get the greater good for the county because of the park issue and the parking for the county community center and so on. So that's really the response. So cost, I'm not sure. I think it's green space. It's going to be there. It's going to be helpful. I think it's going to be a nice, I like it. I think it's going to be a great thing. So I do support it, of course, because I'm the one making the application as the pastor of the church. However, the primary reason is to make it a significant place with safety for pedestrians and seniors.
Thank you. We do have 2 more speakers have signed up. Our next speaker will be Dr. Horning.
Good evening. First, Commissioner Underhill, Wedgwood is still a pit of landfills. There's 8 operating regularly without the right permits, so that battle has not stopped. I think maybe some of the reason that the lack of some folks being here, I didn't learn about this until today, and I'm pretty staying on the things in our communities. I come to Brownsville a lot. I'm a part of this community. I help with the farm aid, and so this isn't a new neighborhood for me. And I find it interesting that people are coming in that I've never seen here, all of a sudden wanting to change something that this man and that man have done so well in this community, and that's to build a community. And when I see builders and people that are employed by builders that don't have the better interest of the people of this community speaking against this, I'm suspicious. I live in the Tan Yard, and right now we are packed with homes with no space, none. Our infrastructure is to the dogs. Right now I have ECUA pumping hundreds of gallons of crud down my street, and I can't get the city, I can't get ECUA, and I can't get the county to address it. And most of y'all know I've got a pretty big mouth and I know how to use regulations. And my concern is about the people that live here, not the dollar. I see the vision that you have of a walkable, bikeable community that is, I can't wait for that park and all the children being part of it. Ma'am, I agree. We don't need any drug dealers down there, but if we make the street more walkable and lit, it'll be much better and more safe than what it is right now with zooming cars that we have on Cervantes right now. It's about the stakeholders, the people that live here, who work here, not outsiders who've never been here. It's about safety, and it's about people coming out. I so support the closing of this little stretch to help this community grow. It's not like the church, where all of a sudden all those homes are worth nothing because their road is closed. This is to bring the community to heart, not anything else. It's not for public or private, well, let's make $1 off of Brownsville while no one's looking. This is a beautiful idea, and one that I hope the county commissioners will support unless big construction companies and big buyers and big homeowners want to come in and make affordable housing like they did in the Tan Yard, which starts at $365,000. That's not affordable housing. And there isn't the infrastructure to hold it. We're in dire straits in my community, and I don't want Brownsville to go the same way. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Faith Higgins.
My words are short and sweet. I'm really here to echo the heart of the Brownsville Business Coalition, which is actually not trying to simultaneously recruit, but is actually meeting by its personal for a Brownsville business mixer after this. So essentially a lot of the business owners feel like they want to make sure that it's intentional development that really respects the vision and the goal of the community, of the public that lives here. So that's it.
Thank you very much. If there are no further questions, commissioners, would you like to? Christian?
No, not Christian.
You don't have a form, man. No.
Thank you all for doing it. Christian Wagley is my name. I spend a great deal of time in Brownsville. I love Brownsville, like all of you do. I wish I'd had the good fortune of, having grown up in the neighborhood. But I spent a lot of time here, visiting Mike and Rivka, going to meetings of the historic Brownsville community and the business partnership. We had one of our Strong Towns meetings right here in this very room with Chuck Marone. I love getting my banh mi sandwiches down the street from Han at the deli there at Yummy, and shopping in the markets. And Dr. Horton and I have known each other for several years. He helped me have a meeting over here at his facility a few years ago, and then we got reconnected on this. We've had some great discussions about this issue in the neighborhood and about the recent issues with Cervantes Street and the traffic and the unfortunate death that happened about 10 days, 2 deaths about 10 days ago. But I guess I am the one that came to the county commission meeting and spoke kind of from the urban planning perspective, and somebody who advocates a lot for a more walkable, bikeable city, which is obviously a growing trend, that we typically don't want to see these streets given away, and we want to keep them in the public realm. A well-developed street grid is vital to dispersing traffic and maintaining those connections for walkability and bikeability, and that's why I spoke at the time in opposition to that. And Dr. Horton knows I'm certainly not opposed to his plans. I asked him about a site plan, and at the time they didn't have one, and I think that would help me see better the vision, to be able to see a site plan and what's in use. And I think knowing that all across the country, communities are taking their streets back from cars and cars going too fast, and there are ways of traffic calming that street and making it a very humane place without necessarily transferring ownership from the public realm to the private realm. And there's always that concern when you lose control like that. So a couple things I'll throw out as I try to wrap up and keep within my 3 minutes. Always that teachable moment and the learning experience and what we can take from this sort of thing. And I think I would ask the county, if they do want to move forward and vacate that right of way, that there be, just as there's going to be easements retained for certain utilities, there could be a condition on that to maintain public access for bicyclists and pedestrians, maybe not for cars. I also think that I hope this experience, because there's some some parking issues interwoven in this building. The parking requirements are probably too high. They're too high in most places. That's a huge obstacle to redevelopment in communities all across the country. Pensacola downtown cut their parking requirements roughly in half about 6 years ago, and that has helped immensely. I would ask the county to look at that, and as part of all this, I haven't dug into the details of that, and also the county to consider these types of street traffic calming types of projects, and how the county can help to incentivize projects like this and make it more likely for them to come in if people do continue to see streets as a barrier to redevelopment. So that's all I would ask, and to make sure, and I'm sure they are under Jack, but that the staff is empowered to bring forward these types of issues and concerns about anytime we give away public property like that. It's got to be a very high bar, I think, to do that. So thank you all for being here and letting me speak to it.
All right. Let me turn it back over to the commissioners. Thank you.
Jack, thank you so much. We do appreciate an administrator that's worked hard. And Mike, I agree with you. We have a great staff, and we need to engage. And I've said this simply about Escambia County. We have no real mission statement, no plan of where we're going. And so when you become reactionary, you react to economic development, you react to crime, and so you're just putting Band-Aids on problems. So we should be proactive with a visionary plan. And I've tried to bring that leadership to Brownsville. And I think my colleague, there's probably not a better colleague than Doug in visionary and expecting where a community can be. And so first thing I learned in Politics 1 is, a lot of people say I hate politicians because they're not honest. And I said, well, most lawyers are not honest, auto body people are not honest, teachers are not honest. And so I try to be an honest elected official. And so there's never a question of where I'm going to vote. I'm very clear, I'm very transparent, and if I'm not elected again because I've taken my stance, hopefully I'm respected in the end. And so, Christian, I think that we're on the same page. Listen, when we closed Rawson Lane, it was a tragedy to that community because they closed the road and isolated a campus to only those people who participate in their religious activities. To me, that's wrong to take a public road and do that. I will not, and Pastor Horton, I will not close a road in Brownsville to the people who live here. But I'm very supportive of closing a road to through traffic that's speeding up and down, as people say, an area that's high in crime, high in blight, and police officers are tracing drug dealers and through our inner core of our community. And so if you talk to law enforcement, they say, listen, all these cut-throughs cause us multiple problems. We can certainly do our job better if we had community policing, bike patrols, and those type of things. And so when I look at Egg Street, I look at an opportunity for seniors to get on their scooters, to get on their riders, and ride through a lighted area with picnic tables, with enlarged sidewalks, and be able to come to this community center. I see children who live all around where I worship every day, where we have the Reap Center, to be able to walk through an area that's well lit up. That when I talk about good stewardship, I talk about, do I take this government street and give it away with nothing in return? No, not without a plan, not without Christian on the team, not without Mike on the team. So there will be a layout before I would vote for it from Pastor Horton that shows how are we going to light this up? How are we going to put sidewalks in this? And guess what? The payment of those lights will not be on the backs of taxpayers. It will be on the backs of those developers. And so certainly I agree with everything that we're doing in Civicon and walkable and bikeable neighborhoods. So I'm not going to support putting up gates and blocking people out. What I will do is talk about working with this developer on how are you going to light this up. How are you going to have security there at dark to make sure that people are being safe as they leave this community center, as they go through this neighborhood, and make sure that they have escorts and they have those type of things are there. And so I don't know what the exact answer is, but I can tell you I want this neighborhood association to be a part of it, whether it's fountains, whether it's video cameras, whether there's something that's creative outside of the normal traditional ways in which we look at walkways. Maybe there's a television screen. I don't know where people can come outside through this neighborhood and watch that. And so those are the type of things I'm going to hold the developer accountable to. And if the developer doesn't want to do that, then I'm not going to be supportive of that developer. But very clearly, I won't support closing a road to pedestrians and cyclists. I will support closing inner roads, core roads, to traffic, to cars. I don't think it prohibited anyone from flowing to Mobile Highway by simply closing that road. But I think that I have to look at the measures of how does it benefit the community, the residents, the citizens of Brownsville. What do we get the greatest benefit from? And if developers and Pastor Horton can show me that there's a greater benefit for the good of this community, then I'm going to be supportive. If they can't show me that, then I'm not going to be supportive. And with that being said, I need to stay married, and my son has a basketball game. So I'm going to turn this over to Doug, and I'm going to listen, and then I'm probably going to exit. Thank you so much.
Thanks. Lehman and I have you talk about the honesty of politicians. He and I are kind of unique in politics in that we're both still working class men, okay? Which means that God's honest truth is that he and I both make less money doing this than we did before, okay? So there's no value in us. The one thing that we've got left is our integrity. There ain't nothing about this job that's worth lying for. That is an absolute fact. So, and the fact that you hear us quite often in trouble with the rich and powerful should tell you that's all the evidence that you actually need about that, to know about that. Yeah, a couple of things that we need to talk about. Mike, You mentioned the possibility, when you were talking a little bit about a form-based overlay, form-based code. All right, our archaic code system is a failure. It has caused much of the trouble, and we're trying to use the tool that got us here to get us out of here. It's like trying to drink yourself out of alcoholism. It's not going to work. Okay? In Perdido Key, we established the very first, it's kind of form-based code light in the Perdido Key master plan. We weren't successful in getting all the way to form-based code, but we took a huge step with the Perdido Key master plan. There is no reason, and as we're talking about Beulah, we're talking about possibly getting a form-based code overlay up in Beulah for the town center. Okay? There is absolutely no reason that what was good for Perdido Key could not also be done here. There's no reason that you cannot here in Brownsville take a springboard off of what we did there and get to a form-based overlay for some central portion here. If you look at our code, there is for every mixed-use suburban dash PK for Perdido Key and a dash PB for Pensacola Beach. Different sets of rules that apply to those two locations. There is no reason whatsoever that we could not have a part of Brownsville that we set aside to apply form-based code and simply have an overlay that is for BV. Okay, if it's good enough for the folks that live out on Perdido and Pensacola Beach, quite frankly, I don't see why we can't apply it here. That would be a victory, a huge victory for getting us moving on to the future and what next Brownsville looks like. Speaking of next Brownsville, I am worried about some of the dialogue that comes with the road diet discussion, because I feel like we're looking to the past of Brownsville to determine, to a great extent, what the future of Brownsville is. So Mike, I worry about the idea that the commercial corridor of Brownsville needs to be revitalized. I don't know that that's necessarily a reasonable reach. Again, going back and trying to do better at the things that we did wrong, we may be able to set ourselves a higher goal that the commercial core of this town, or this village as we develop it, does not necessarily have to be along that corridor. The road diet has some concerns that go with it. I'm worried about what it's going to do to Avery Street to the north and Jackson to the south, as cars don't just, it's kind of like crime. When you put the squeeze on it, it doesn't go away, it doesn't end. It goes somewhere else. So we need to be careful about the unintended consequences. So those are the things that I'm taking that opportunity to just get those out there so that they're a matter of public record with Lumen. So Pastor Horton, one of the things that I do with the richest of the developers when they come, and they come, I always ask them the same thing. I don't really care about all the color glossies that you give me. Okay, because you're always going to show me the best case scenario for the decision that you're asking me to make. Don't give me a sales pitch. I don't do PowerPoint, I do Excel spreadsheet. Okay, so the scenario that I give them, Pastor Horton, and I mean you no disrespect when I tell you this because I'm going to hold you to that same standard, or even any group to the same standard. Whatever I do, I have to think about the worst case scenario that I'm allowing with the decision that I make. So when I upzone something, then somebody says, well, I'm going to build this beautiful stuff here, I have to imagine a worst case scenario that I would also be allowing, because once I make that decision, once that shot is fired, I can't put it back in the gun. I lose that control. So with this project, I'll tell you, Pastor Horton, what bothers me is, again, meaning no disrespect whatsoever, and certainly not calling for any intervention here. We make this decision on a Monday, you have a heart attack and pass on Tuesday, your church decides to liquidate this property, a super block, becomes a very valuable thing to a developer for the next Forest Creek Apartments. Okay? I have to think about that, and I have to make sure that whatever I do, I put constraints in there that can ensure that that cannot happen under that worst case scenario. Certainly, I believe God's got a lot more work for you to do here. He ain't calling you home anytime soon. It's very unlikely that that's going to happen, but I have to consider that when I make a decision. So with no plan in front of me that I can then lock in constraints on, that's exactly the kind of thing that gets me to a very quick no. We've seen that happen all the time. We get sold a bill of goods that's up here. Oh, well, that didn't work out financially. We sell it. They come in and they say, well, here you go. We're going to build you at Forest Creek. Well, you can't do that. And it's like, no, actually, Commissioner, you can't stop me. So I'm helping you to get in my mind a little bit. And here's how I get to yes, is to really cover down on that constraint. With regard to, Christian, the struggle that we have with the vacating process, this is a process that has very strict legal parameters to it. I cannot say I'm going to vacate this property, however, I have to have this constraint and that constraint, because those constraints, you have to do this and you have to do that, that is by definition a de facto public interest in the land. And I don't have a choice of being able to, this is actually a binary function process that the law prescribes for vacating public land. That's one of those things that, quite frankly, the advocates for this should all really work very closely with Allison Rogers' office, because that is the same guidance that all 5 of us are going to be operating from. We open ourselves up to legal ramifications with every decision. I mean, every time we set foot on the dais and gavel a meeting open, we pretty much open ourselves up to it. Goodness knows I'm in the newspaper being sued for something all the time. Usually just by my predecessor, but help us by understanding what we're up against. If you'll help us get to that comfort zone on that, so that we know that we're not opening up the county to that kind of a concern. That really kind of, I think, covers down on the things that I am that I'm chewing through at any given time, whatever the next things that I've got to chew through to get to a decision point. I'm happy to put those down in writing that help us get to that resolution. I honestly think, I do not consider myself an equity holder in Brownsville. I am a steward of the equity holders in Brownsville. So it's not up to me. If you guys want to paint the whole thing purple and that's what everybody thinks is right, then that is my job, is to enable you to get it painted purple. The form-based code overlay, I think that the county's ready for that. 4 years ago, when we created Perdido Key Master Plan, most people, let's be honest with you, most people haven't read it yet anyway. Most people have no grasp of what those words mean, and yet it is empowering Perdido Key to do some pretty amazing things to protect the environment while growing at the same time. So it's a very cool thing. What we did then is the high watermark of smart towns type of behavior in Escambia County. Folks, that was 4 years ago. It's time for a new high water mark, and I would love to see that high water mark be Brownsville. Thanks. Any questions? No questions? I get to go away, right? So, all right. I'll stay as long as anybody has any questions. I don't know that I'm...
I have one question.
Fire away.
Is it possible for us, the public, to pay for this vision so that we can still own it and have something that we can decide in 10 or 20 years if we want to do something different with?
Keep ownership and make it part of the whole plan, what's going to happen with the senior development.
I am open to that discussion. Lumen's out of the has stepped out, as he said, and guys, don't ever.
Well, that way you're not giving away the control of whatever's going to go in there. We want to make sure what goes in there needs to go in there. That's the concern.
Keeps the public as a stakeholder, stockholder? Something like
Well,
that
just to
sounds...
when you say there's no control, that's the concern, to make sure that what Mike and Christian and I talked about, we all want the same thing on that street. The issue is how to get it.
Yeah.
And that's the debate. So it's a principal issue. The goals are still the same.
Mm-hmm.
What Christian wants there, what Mike wants there, what I want there. We all want what's best for Brownsville.
But if we talk about public-private partnerships and all these $100 million crazy deals and whatnot, and those scare the daylights out of me, but what you're talking about sounds like a PPP. In a very different way, right? But not, a normal public-private partnership in Escambia County means that we take on all the risk for the public and then some guy gets rich. That seems to be our model. And I would like to, we should kind of look at the rules that constrain us with regard to a public-private partnership, and then instead of the private part being a financier or a developer, the private part is a citizens organization. That's kind of interesting. I'm wide open to that within the parameters of what is legal, ethical, and moral. That sounds, yeah, you know,
We all want the same thing, it's just how we do it.
yeah, no, that sounds like an interesting proposal. I don't know that the state's public-private partnership rules ever considered something like that, but in case you haven't noticed, I kind of like upsetting apple carts, so let's force the state, let's see what those rules look like with regard to that approach, and if we can do it within there, let's make the state tell us we can't.
The only thing, just to throw some more information in, from what I have read with the Florida Housing Board for affordable housing projects, the green space, the pedestrian space is very specific. So yeah, if the board took me home tonight, that would still have to happen. The regulations on that funding is very, very specific. And when you talk about the $365,000 homes, this is rent geared to income. And they have a formula that you have to qualify for this to even happen.
Yep.
And it's all nonprofit. It's not profiteers. It's not big developers. It's not. That's not what's happening. So.
Okay. Well, and I'm wide open to hear that kind of thing. What I don't want to create is an asset that then the highest and best use of it would be a Forest Creek, that then the county would not be able to prevent that a Forest Creek type thing from happening again. Lumen and I have been very much on the record. There hasn't been a Forest Creek built in the last 4 years, and I think as long as either one of us are on that board, we won't be doing that again.
We're not interested in
So, and I know that you aren't. Unfortunately, not everybody has your wisdom, sir. There are some people who still believe that that's the kind of product that they want to be building. And we want to make sure that we don't ever put a chink in our own armor in Escambia County that says that kind of crap doesn't belong in Escambia County. Thanks.
Good.
Anybody else? Thanks, everybody. Much appreciated.
Thank you.